So now what we're facing in our generation and our culture today in 2013, we are up against a very big dilemma because we are masters at distorting doctrine. We have become the most wonderful group of culturally relevant people rather than allowing the Bible to dictate the acceptance of my cultural beliefs. I now take my cultural beliefs and I fit them into making sense scripturally. In other words, let me go back to doctrine, for sound doctrine. The best I can define sound doctrine. Sound doctrine is a plumb line. We'll go old school carpentry for a minute. A plumb line, you can never cheat a plumb line. Never. If you want to know if something's straight, you can eyeball it and go, that looks straight. But you cannot fake a plumb line. When you hang a plumb line, it was a string that's connected. It falls down to a bob that's a little heavier, and it, according to gravitational pull, that bob will pull that string at a perfectly 90-degree angle. And it will hang dead straight. And if you want to know whether or not the wall you're looking at is dead straight, hang a plumb line and realize how off the wall really is. David and I went out in the foyer several months back and hung the TVs. It was a beautiful day of hanging TVs. We did it with a nice 3-foot ruler, a nice 3-foot measuring guide that had a nice bubble in it. You could bubble it left and right and up and down. And we hung that bubble up there, and we got that TV just as bubble straight as you could bubble straight get it. And man, I backed up and said, David, you cannot get that TV, the bracket we were going to hang it on. So the bracket is just bubble straight. I was like, man, that's good hanging. We need to do this for a living. He started laughing. We get the nice TV in the foyer, hanging out in the foyer, bring it up, hang it on the wall, back up. How many of you know now I've got a major problem? Because the TV is perfectly square to the bubble, but how many of you know the ceiling ain't square? It is hard to take a 100-year-old ceiling and bust that thing square. And I started scratching my head going, whoever bubbled the ceiling must have been missing some eyeglasses that day. So I laid a bubble on the ceiling, laid a bubble on the TV. I backed away and looked at it, and it literally looked like the TV was slanting. And I backed up and said, that is impossible. It can't be slanting. I put it back on the TV. The TV's perfectly straight. I was like, gosh. And then I back away. I leave the bubble. I'm looking at the bubble. Bubble says straight, but my eyes, it's like you had to watch the TV like this. It's like, oh. Now, what is that? That is, without a bubble, deception can get you. If you don't believe it, ask women or maybe a man who hangs wallpaper. If you hang wallpaper starting in a corner and work your way around the room, by the time you meet back up the corner, the wallpaper's like this. The flowers are uneven, because just because it's a nice, beautiful corner doesn't mean the corner's plumb. So sometimes you don't realize how out of plumb you are until you work a distance around. But the further you come away from out of plumb and work your way back around to out of plumb, you suddenly realize, dog, that ain't even close. And I learned that the hard way wallpapering. I started in a corner, took off around the room, got back, and I was nowhere close. And so the same principle applies, that God and New Testament says this is the plumb line. And if this is not hanging up to tell you what is right and wrong, you can be skewed, and you really don't know you're skewed, but the further away you move from sound doctrine, the more skewed your life becomes. So now 2,000 years removed from the writing of the gospel, in 2013, we have a very skewed society. The things we believe. We'll murder babies. Well, I mean, I don't want to get in all the political jargon, but I mean, we are a skewed society. And really, you can't even say anything, Because when you try to say something, they immediately will point back, well, you have no right to judge me. Look at your life. And I go, well, yeah, look at mine. I know better than you. I mean, I messed up too. I mean, we've all messed up. But it's not about my beliefs, because you can be a Christian and have some very messed up beliefs. And just because you're, quote, Christian doesn't make you right. You can be a Christian and be just as wrong as everybody else is wrong. So Paul doesn't say put that back up there, Carol, verse 10. Paul doesn't say watch your Christianity. He says watch your doctrine. Sound doctrine. It's got to be sound. If it's not sound, you're going to mess up in the future. It may look like a little penny ante problem right now, but 100 years down the road, it's going to mess up an entire generation of people. 200 years down the road, we're going to be so messed up. Let me just throw this out to you. How many of you will believe in the last 50 years America has changed drastically? In 50 years. I mean, if we just go back to 1913, that's 100 years ago. We have drastically changed since 1913. We couldn't even make a phone call in 1913. We were barely making, cars in 19. We've never been to the moon. There was no cell phones. In 100 years, we have astronomically come a long way concerning technology, medical science, and brilliance. But we are further away today from the doctrine of Scripture than we've ever been before in the entirety of all humanity.